Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our This Week in Israel segment, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days, right from here in Tel Aviv. I'm Aaron Porras, here to keep you informed.
Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israeli and Palestinian leaders react to the Paris Peace Conference. Israel foils a record number of smuggling attempts to the Gaza Strip, and an incredible historical discovery provides an inside look at the life of the Holocaust victim Anne Frank. I'm Natasha Kirchuk here with the latest news in Israel. Leaders across Israel are finally celebrating about the Paris Peace Conference, and it's all because of the, quote, weakened text of the summit's final joint declaration. The day-long summit came to a finish yesterday evening, with a statement calling on Israel and the Palestinians to refrain from one-sided actions in their path towards peace.
L'initiative que la France a lancée et à laquelle vous avez pleinement adhéré, c'était d'abord une alerte, car la solution des deux États, celle sur laquelle la communauté internationale s'était retrouvée depuis plusieurs années, apparaît menacée. Elle l'est physiquement sur le terrain, par l'accélération de la colonisation, elle l'est politiquement, par l'affaiblissement progressif du camp de la paix, elle l'est moralement, par la méfiance qui s'accumule entre les parties et bien sûr qu'exploitent les extrémistes.
The declaration not only urged the two sides to restate their commitment to a two-state solution, but also to disassociate from voices that reject that goal. Israel has continued to dismiss the conference as a trivial and ineffective means of bringing about peace with the Palestinians.
Well, this conference is really a futile conference, and it's one which is going to push peace further back. It's a little bit like marriage counseling with neither the husband nor the wife present, but 75 diplomats from around the world trying to solve a complex and rather intimate conflict.
But Israeli officials are at least happy that the summit's final declaration excluded passages condemning the Israeli settlement enterprise, which were included in the recent UN Security Resolution 2334.
Je sais ce que l'on a dit de cette conférence, qu'elle pourrait être une naïveté. Comment imaginer parler de la paix aujourd'hui quand la guerre déchire une grande partie du Moyen-Orient? On a dit même que ça pouvait être une futilité, presque un supplément d'âme que nous viendrions ici introduire dans les relations internationales. Je vous l'affirme ici. La naïveté, ce serait de croire que le rapprochement entre Israël et ses voisins, si nécessaire, serait possible sans avancer vers la paix entre Israéliens et Palestiniens.
70 different nations attended the Paris Peace Summit, which the French foreign minister claims was arranged to convey an international sense of urgency about the stalemate in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. The Palestinian president says he's committed to a two-state solution and respects the summit's final declaration. But some Palestinian leaders say it won't make a difference.
As it turned out, this was just a proclamation of statements of intent, of commitment to the two-state solution. It was slightly watered down because of several interventions to try to avoid concrete mechanisms or deadlines.
The nations involved in this year's Paris Peace Conference are expected to meet again before the end of the year.
Plus de 20 ans après la signature des accords d'Oslo, chacun doit bien savoir quelle est la leçon que nous tirons de l'histoire. Chacun doit bien comprendre quel est l'enjeu et que rien ne peut être improvisé ou bouleversé. Il y a un effort qui a été engagé il y a des années. Il doit se poursuivre. Il est légitime, il est nécessaire que la communauté internationale réfléchisse sérieusement à la meilleure manière d'accompagner la solution des deux États.
Hundreds gathered in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square Saturday night to protest against the Prime Minister, asking him to resign over allegations of corruption. The Prime Minister is being investigated in 2 separate corruption cases, and fears are growing that should he be indicted, the governing coalition would crumble. Chants of, quote, "you take from the poor to give to the rich, a government of the corrupt," end quote, could be heard throughout the protest, and several members of opposition parties were seen leading the group. In one case, Netanyahu was charged with accepting excessive gifts amounting to $100,000 to $150,000 in value from wealthy businessman Arnon Milchan, but no favors in return for the gifts have been proven. Netanyahu claims that Milchan is a friend, and the gifts were only gifts. The second case alleges that the Israeli premier offered to hurt the Israel Hayom daily newspaper with targeted legislation in return for more favorable press in Arnon Moses' rival paper Yediot Achronot. The supposed tape between Netanyahu and Moses proving the collusion has not yet been released. The tape was allegedly recorded by the Prime Minister himself, however, and according to Netanyahu was meant to be proof of innocence in just such a situation. Netanyahu has repeatedly denied he's broken any laws. Speaking to coalition ministers, the Prime Minister said, quote, "Naturally, I cannot go into the details, but what I can tell you is that there is a campaign of tendentious leaks designed to mislead the public and distort the true picture as if crimes were committed that never were, and all this will be clarified later. There will be nothing because there is nothing," end quote.
It looks like American involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will be shifting into the hands of an unlikely candidate, President-elect Donald Trump's Jewish son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Trump has just confirmed that he will be using Kushner to try to broker a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. The announcement comes just days after the controversial president-elect named the 36-year-old as a senior advisor in his upcoming administration, leading critics to accuse Trump of nepotism. The incoming leader says Kushner has been a, quote, "tremendous advisor" throughout his campaign and is proud that his son-in-law will have a key leadership role in his administration. Suicide is often a tragic consequence of mental disorders that have gone undiagnosed. Now, Israel's health ministry is rolling out a new plan to identify those most at risk of suicide and to help them before it's too late. About 500 Israelis kill themselves every year, and the ministry intends to lower that number as much as it possibly can. And for this expressed purpose, more than 130,000 caregivers will be trained in several specific departments, including welfare, education, and youth. The participants are set to include police officers, religious leaders, clerks at unemployment bureaus, social workers, and even judges. These gatekeepers will refer people experiencing suicidal tendencies for immediate treatment. They'll be working closely with personal physicians, educators, and even staff at baby clinics who recognize women struggling with severe postpartum depression. Plus, the gatekeepers will also focus on other at-risk communities such as new immigrants, the elderly, and LGBT members. This is all part of the national Israeli plan to combat suicide, which will also see the opening of more emergency hotlines, better treatment and monitoring of those suffering from anxiety and other problems, as well as increased public outreach to further raise awareness of the phenomenon, which can be critical in saving your loved ones' lives. The suspected terrorist who killed 39 people, including an Israeli teenager, in the New Year's Eve attack at an Istanbul nightclub has finally been captured by Turkish police following a 2-week nationwide manhunt. The alleged attacker has been named as Abdulgadir Masharipov, who was caught in a district of Istanbul called Esenyurt. According to officials, the Uzbek jihadi initially hid in a safe house where he was joined by his wife and children. He then went on the run with his 4-year-old son, who was with him when he was taken into custody in a massive police operation.
Abdulkadir Masharipov, kod adı Ebu Muhammed Horasani Abdulkavi, Özbekistan doğumlu, 1983 Özbekistan doğumlu bir kişi. Afganistan'da eğitim almış ve 4 dil bilen, iyi yetiştirilmiş bir kişi, bir terörist.
Bununla ilgili birçok detay var ama sorgulama aşamasında olduğu için bu kadarını söylemekle yetinelim. Zamanla gelişmeler hakkında bilgiler ilgili arkadaşlar tarafından kamuoyuna verilecek. Önemli olan yapılan bu alçak saldırının failinin yakalanmış olmasıdır. Bunun arkasındaki iradenin, güçlerin her kimse ortaya çıkarılmasıdır.
Just 75 minutes into the new year, the attacker shot his way into the city's Reina nightclub, where he fired and reloaded an automatic rifle several times to shoot the wounded as they lay on the ground. 27 of the 39 murdered clubgoers were foreigners, including Lian Zahel Nasser from central Israel. The 19-year-old was celebrating with several girlfriends from her village of Tira, one of whom was wounded and had to be airlifted home. The suspect is now undergoing questioning by Turkish police who say he entered the country illegally.
Hayır, illegal giriş. Ocak ayında illegal giriş yapıldı. Doğu sınırlarımızdan yapıldığı şeklinde elimizde kuvvetli tahminler var diye.
Security sources are reporting that the gunman is a well-trained killer who fought in Syria for the Islamic State terror group, which claimed responsibility for the attack.
Yani en azından bunun DAEŞ adına yapıldığı net.
Israelis woke up today to find out that the army and other security agencies have succeeded in widespread operations over the past 48 hours aimed at halting Palestinian terrorism. The Shin Bet security service is revealing that its forces have just broken up an extensive Hamas cell operating in the Palestinian Authority. After being tracked for weeks, 13 terrorists were arrested in a joint raid. One of those detained is a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, which is the PA's defunct parliament. Hamas appears to be escalating its efforts to garner support from West Bank Arabs, particularly around Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's base in Ramallah. The so-called Hearts and Minds campaign to capture local support involves the terrorists' offers to provide social outreach projects, in addition to generous offers of financial assistance to Palestinian prisoners, terrorists' families, and a local student group. The source of the money is being traced to Gaza and abroad, including foreign terror groups. A large quantity of the dirty cash was confiscated, along with a vehicle and a trove of propaganda materials. The Shin Bet says it's learning a great deal from the discovery of this infrastructure about Hamas strategies to establish a presence in the West Bank to undermine the PA, while continuing efforts to carry out vicious terror attacks against Israelis. In addition to that, 17 other suspected Palestinian criminals were arrested in other raids across the West Bank, including one terrorist captured just north of the Jewish city of Modi'in, which is near Jerusalem. IDF soldiers also busted an illegal weapons-making facility outside of Bethlehem. Have the Israeli Prime Minister's legal problems reached the critical point where they're affecting his ability to govern? Well, not according to Times of Israel editor David Horowitz, who tells ILTV's Steve Leibowitz that it would be a terrible thing if a prime minister was forced out of office due to the weight of the investigation without actually being guilty.
Look, I remember with when Olmert was prime minister, the sheer endless questioning and the new cases that would come up and so on led to assertions that he couldn't run the country effectively because he was so preoccupied with some of his legal complications, and then pressure began to grow within the coalition, and in fact it was really, I think, probably critics within the coalition that forced him to the conclusion that he had to step aside and grapple with his legal issues and couldn't carry on as prime minister. At the moment you don't see that. In the case of Netanyahu, you don't see prominent, credible members of government coming out and saying, look, this has become ridiculous. And I think...
But you also don't have too many standing up and loudly supporting him and his claims of complete innocence.
Yeah, I think there's a real onerous dilemma here. I mean, Netanyahu is the democratically elected prime minister of Israel, and there are two sets of allegations swirling around him, whose full significance we don't know, whose full details we don't know. It would be a terrible thing if a prime minister was forced out of office simply by weight of investigation, and it turned out that actually there was no case to answer here, and there was no case ever brought here. What an incredible responsibility that would be for the Attorney General if he allowed this to reach the stage where the prime minister was forced out of office. It's really, really complicated. The one area where again, I still think we have to use the word allegedly and reportedly and so on, where it seems to me, where I said to you, nauseating, is the ease with which a newspaper publisher is apparently prepared to abandon objective journalism for the sake of his business interests. That I can see there. I don't know that a deal was implemented. I don't know the legality of Netanyahu maneuvering. I would have thought if you're a politician, you want to get favorable coverage. When you're offering something in return for that, the nature of that offer, the capacity of you to deliver on that offer, the question of whether you ever did anything to advance that offer. Now you're into the legal questions and the specific questions that we don't know the answer to. What we do seem to see is a newspaper publisher who is prepared to sacrifice the integrity of his newspaper.
I do want to ask you something about that. If you want to influence a newspaper, you would do what Netanyahu did with you and your staff, invite them for a meeting, discuss with them. You don't invite the publisher and try to offer him to shut down some other business or to curtail some other business that's in competition with you, especially if you don't own that other business.
It certainly has its unique aspects, that side of the story, I agree, that are beyond what we've known about in other countries and in this country. I mean, it is not unheard of, I think, anything but, that a newspaper publisher would have an ongoing, very serious relationship with a president or a prime minister, and that the politician would want to build the kinds of relationships with newspaper publishers that would boost his or her chances of remaining in office. The question of what they would do in return, the question of the nature of that relationship, the legality of that relationship. In the Israeli case, the particular influence or not that Netanyahu might have over a rival that would mean he would have tools to offer a newspaper publisher, and the legality of that. I mean, some of this is uncharted territory, but the notion of a prime minister being in touch with a publisher, I can tell you in previous jobs, have I become aware that a prime minister was upset about content and was in touch with an owner? Sure. I mean, there are pressures, and my sense of journalism is you try to do what's right and you try to serve your readers faithfully. But there would be those kinds of frictions and tensions, and contacts, is I think the norm.
David Horowitz, thanks so much for being with us at ILTV.
Israel has just finished raising the height of its electronic fence along the border with Egypt, all in an effort to tackle illegal immigration, infiltrations by terrorists, and drug and weapons trafficking. The 250-mile-long barrier was originally completed in 2014 and stretches from the Gaza Strip to the Israeli Red Sea town of Eilat. The fence was successful in cutting down the number of African migrants making their way to Israel, which numbered in hundreds every month. In fact, in 2015, only 213 managed to breach the electronic barrier. The lowered rate prompted authorities to raise the fence's height from 15 to 25 feet, and that move has just been completed. Additional detection devices have also been added to the fence and have allegedly curbed the flow of illegal infiltration into Israel immensely. In 2016, only 11 people successfully crossed into Israel. Israel hosts about 53,000 refugees and asylum seekers, 36,000 of which hail from Eritrea and 14,000 of which are Sudanese. Most of these migrants made it into Israel through Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, and Israel rarely grants them refugee status. Israeli defense officials are refusing to comment on attempts to retrieve an IDF surveillance drone that reportedly crashed in Lebanon, although Hezbollah terrorist media is reporting that the Lebanese army and UN peacekeepers are now searching for the wreckage. An Israeli military spokesperson will only say that the army is investigating why its Skylark unmanned aerial vehicle came down after flying near the border with Lebanon yesterday afternoon. The miniature UAV is a tactical aircraft designed by the Israeli Elbit Systems defense electronics company and operated by the IDF's artillery corps to provide live video feed to soldiers on the ground. Media associated with the Lebanon-based Hezbollah terror group claims the drone crashed in a region called Labune, which is just north of the Israeli town of Shlomi. Rugged terrain in the area is reportedly making location of the debris difficult. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, has neither confirmed or denied reports that its troops are also trying to find the Israeli drone. Speaking of more Israeli innovations, even though the Israeli medical field continues to make remarkable breakthroughs in cancer treatment almost every day, skyrocketing numbers of people continue to be diagnosed with the disease. Now, researchers in the Jewish state are turning their sights on less expensive ways to defeat it. The Israeli P-Cure startup has developed a method to cut the cost of proton therapy by 50%. This treatment uses less than half of the radiation that X-rays do, and it's even more effective because it works by painlessly delivering radiation with external proton beams that directly target tumors through the skin without damaging healthy tissue. But until now, it's been extremely costly because the procedure requires specialized equipment, including an accelerator and a centrifugal machine to generate the beams, as well as highly protected facilities. All in all, there are only about 20 clinics doing proton therapy in existence today, but the Israeli company intends to change that. First, the scientists succeeded in eliminating the need for a centrifuge, and then they even further refined software that integrates diagnostic information such as CT scans with the machine to keep the beam pinpointed on the cancer. The improved technique and massive drop in costs is expected to save countless lives around the world, because now far more patients will be able to access the treatment. Now here's some exciting news. It looks like Israeli music fans have another concert to look forward to this summer. And no, it's not Justin Bieber. The veteran rock star Rod Stewart is scheduled to perform in Tel Aviv this June. The British rocker announced his upcoming performance on Tuesday with that special video message.
This is Rod Stewart here, and I shall be coming to Tel Aviv on June the 14th, playing at the Hayakon Park. So don't miss it. It's going to be a splendid night of fantastic music. You'll hear everything you want to hear. June the 14th, Tel Aviv. Don't miss it.
Even though his official website has yet to list the show, tickets have already gone on sale on the Lian Ticket Agency's website. The cost between $77 to $197. The legendary rocker made his first mark in the 1960s performing with major rock bands like the Jeff Beck Group, the Dimensions, and the Faces. He then led a successful solo career through the 1970s to 1980s, selling over 100 million records worldwide. He was even knighted by Prince Charles for his contribution to the music world. So, with more than a dozen Grammy nominations under his belt, it's no surprise that Israelis around the country are already scrambling to watch him perform.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.